software problem with FaceTime. I was trying to get an Apple ID, and I'm having problems getting Apple IDs and this, that, and the other. So, hey, y'all, I'm back on this stream. Uh, I'm so glad. Let me just do this because this is unusual. By the way, this is the stuff that the conscious community coons and all the Hotep niggas never talk about this. This guy here. I'm going to put this up here. This is called A Bunch of Five by Frank Kitson. Thank you, everybody that's coming through this. I am so sorry again. I feel really bad about that. Okay. The book. Y'all ready? Tell me if y'all ready. Tell me if y'all ready. Y'all want something new? Let's do something new. I'm going to do some black stuff, but I want you to get this. This is Frank Nitson. I just want to run down where this man used people within their own groups to kill each other, to perpetuate white control. He did it in Kenya. He did it in Malaysia. He did it in Muscat and Oman, which is in Arabian Peninsula. He did it in Cyprus. You understand me? Let me see. I'm trying to think of, I'm going to give the idea and maybe framework and operations. And this is a book that is used by the War College and everybody else. And it explains. So I'm going to look at this. And this book came all the way from England. I mean, so I'm gonna get two. I'm gonna look at two parts. I'm gonna read with the origins, and I'm gonna go through this. Y'all ready? Cause I'm ready. Thank you, three people up in here. Let everybody know I'm back. This is chapter 3 of A Bunch of Fives. Bunch of Five. Take this down. You might be able to get a copy. And this explains how they use what's called gang counter gang strategy to get people to murder and kill each other. The CIA later picked this up. This is being used to get us to kill one another. Since I'm talking about racism, let me add this in here because this is what these other fools never tell you about. The British Army in the 1950s normally conducted its counterinsurgency campaigns along the lines indicated in the last chapter. Units expected whatever intelligence organization existed to provide pinpoint information regarding the whereabouts of future intentions of enemy groups so that soldiers could be put into contact with them. The intelligence organizations were seldom capable of doing this regularly, so the Army did two things. Firstly, it complained about the inefficiency of the intelligence organization, and secondly, it set about looking for an enemy by conducting large-scale operations in likely areas on a hit-or-miss basis. Because of its staff procedures were effective, it was well suited to exploiting such successes in a way success as it may have had when carrying out random searches for the enemy. For example, if a patrol bumped into a gang, the Army could concentrate large numbers in the area quickly. But if it was unlucky with the random operations, nothing happened. The Army was not able to exploit the sort of background information which the intelligence organization was often able to produce, even when it could not provide pinpoint contact information. Contact information means that they're traitors and snitches. No people are pressed without traitors and snitches. We are in the spot that we are in now because I'd say 1 in 3 black folks is a traitor. In other words, we in the special bunch thought that the list of gang members, the details of weapons, and the accounts of gang policies and long-term plans which we got from our interrogations and contacts would be of great value, but military commanders expressed little interest in such material or in the people who were producing it. This guy's talking about being in Kenya. By the spring of 1954, my organization was really beginning to produce a great deal of stuff which the Army did not want. My parish had been extended by the addition of the Nairobi district, so I now had 3 districts to look after instead of 2. But I had been given 2 extra field intelligence assistants for Nairobi, together with 3 officers, 1 for each of my districts. For some weeks, the field intelligence assistants had been employing Africans. I repeat, employing Africans to run informers so that the covert information gathering network was becoming established throughout the area for which I was responsible. To start with, we had no funds with which to pay these people, so we were obliged to finance our activity with monies captured from the gangsters, supplemented occasionally from my private resources. They didn't have money. So understand, you're going to take booze, drugs, and give that to your snitches the same way that cocaine and all are used by police and money taken are used to get people to snitch and betray each other. This is going on in the streets of every city in this country. But this was irregular and laid us open to the charge of looting. So as soon as it was apparent that our methods were paying off, we were given a proper budget. By the summer of 1954, and let me stop. What happened in the summer of 1964? Black people started acting crazy. Literally, the Americans borrowed the British using stuff to kill their black people to do it on us. What's the biggest ganged out city in the country? Los Angeles. Where's the city that had the riot in 65? Watts, Los Angeles. Now they had one in Harlem in 64, and then they had one in Watts next. Are y'all getting me? That these people share information. There's a thing called the Five Eyes. That's England, that's United States, that's Canada, that's New Zealand, that's Australia. And you may as well add Israel. All of these English-speaking or have relationships with the British Commonwealth are the white power structured Anglo folks to control their disproportionate share of the planet that they have. And they help one another. When they had the rebellion of black folks in Dedham and the other areas in England in 2011, that's almost 10 years ago, they had Bratton, the little bastard that was in Los Angeles and in New York, who brutalizes blacks all over America, went over to England to help the English repress and abuse the black population there. Ever since they had the riots in England in 2011, you've had all of this black on black murder for 10 straight years. 10 straight years. Right after the people from New York and Los Angeles that knew how to make black folks kill each other, they went and they had the rap music and everything where people curse and hate each other. This is a weapon to get us. I couldn't give a damn if I never heard another rap record in my life. Burn all of it up. I don't care who likes it. Get off my platform. It's trash if it causes us to kill one another. Soul music made us love one another. Rap and this other stuff has made us hate and disrespect each other. And they've promoted it and driven it over in England. And they've even done the same thing with dancehall music in Jamaica to create a youth culture that's around drugs, sex, and confusion to get people to kill one another. It's done time and time and time again. And by the way, this is why I don't like Clyburn, and I don't like practically any nigga that calls himself a leader, that they haven't called for an end to this covert war against our people, whether they shoot you or not. (1954). By the summer of 1954, I had over 200 men working for me. But that is to anticipate the events by several months. At the time speaking, my chief concerns was the fact that although they're becoming efficient at collecting intelligence, no one knew how to exploit it. Oh, these dried books are terrible. No one knew how to exploit it because it was not exactly what was wanted. Since we were meant to be providing a service, it seemed that the fault must lie with us, although in years to come, I was to change my views in this respect. Meanwhile, I was determined that somehow we would discover a way of turning the vast quantity of background information which we were collecting into detailed contact information which the soldiers wanted. These people collect information on black kids, boys in particular, from early ages and come after them later. They, in particular in Los Angeles, they studied what the British were doing. Let me keep reading. But the major matter of our policy was not merely was our only source of word, was not our only source of word at the time. There was a day in April 1954 when I found myself sitting on a bench at the main passage of the Nairobi Supreme Court, waiting to give evidence. Two field intelligence assistants were with me. The accused had been captured in a battle and had passed through our hands on the way to prison. Formal evidence to this effect was required from all of us. At 12:30, the judge adjourned the court for luncheon, and we were told to be back by 2 p.m. I had arranged to meet an African, a coon, a snitch, at 2:30 p.m., and I could not afford to put him off. Had I done so, he would have swum away, and we would have missed an unusual opportunity for collecting information, and one that would not recur. I'd explained as much to the situation as possible to my officer in charge of the court and asked to be excused until 4 p.m. He appeared deeply shocked and warned me that there would be a fine for contempt of court were I to be absent when required. I returned at 4 p.m. to find that my turn had not yet come. 10 minutes later, the court was adjourned until the following day. The next morning, we were again on our bench and in the passage by 10 a.m. Neither of the field intelligence assistants had been to bed because they had spent the night making up for the lost time the day before. One of them started telling the other of the occasion on which Eric had come to the court as a witness. He had engaged a gang of 4, killing 2 and capturing 2 others. One of these prisoners was charged with being an armed terrorist, but the other one had thrown away his weapon before capture and could only be charged with consorting. Both charges carried the death penalty. When the case was tried, the armed man persuaded the court that he was a prisoner of the gang and that he had been made to carry a weapon so that he would be compromised in the eyes of the law. He was accordingly acquitted. The other terrorist was also acquitted of consorting on the grounds. That man he was consorting with had been proved innocent. I had often heard the story from Eric, but could not help from laughing again. At about midday, taking the law into my own hands, I told the officers to go about their business and undertook to pay any fines for contempt of court out of the intelligence fund. A clerk from my office was left behind to contact us when it seemed that our appearance was imminent, and I then departed also. When the court adjourned for the weekend, our turn had not come up. On the Saturday evening, message reached me from a police station that on the forest edge via the operations room in Kayimbu, an army patrol had come out of the forest having fought a battle with a large gang. They had killed 4 terrorists and captured a number of documents. There was little rest for any of us that night. First, there was a long drive through the countryside, windscreens lashed by torrential rain, and the cab permeated by the smell of mud, baking on the exhaust pipe. This was followed by some hours crouched around a paraffin lamp in the field intelligence assistant's hut near Gatundu. It was too cold to open the windows, so we endured air polluted by dozens of cigarettes. Some fresh air found its way through the door as people came in and out. The Africans brought in sticky red mud on the soles of their feet and left the Man Friday footprints all over the floor. That's a put down. Man Friday. Remember Robinson Crusoe? This racist is making fun of the Africans not having shoes. Gradually, a picture of a gang emerged as the document gave up the secrets to the translators. Outside, the sky turned gray, and it became even colder in the hut. The last of the flying ants flew into the paraffin lamp and collapsed in the squiggy mess at the bottom of it. Soon, the lamp was unnecessary, but it continued to burn because no one bothered to turn it out. By 11 p.m., the picture was completed, and I decided to go to General Headquarters in Nairobi to pass on the news. We were nearly out of petrol by the time we reached Kayembu, so we went to the military unit there, which was responsible for replenishing us. An old sergeant was in charge of the petrol, and we found him in a mess. He declined to supply us on the grounds that it was Sunday. At that moment, the adjutant came, and he supported the sergeant. Black rage welled up inside me as I walked out intent on getting the colonel to smash some ginger into his people. But I changed my mind and bought petrol at the Duca. It was a cardinal rule of mine not to scrap with my own side because I depended on them so much. All at the same time, I was still shimmering when I reached Nairobi. In actual fact, the patrol storeman was only behaving in the same way dozens of others throughout the base area. The judge with his interminable adjournments, or the workshop crews going away for the weekend leaving vehicles unrepaired, were the other examples of the same thing. There was always a cleavage between the men in the field and those in the rear, and Kenya was no exception. Indeed, it was often seen as if the governor was trying to give the impression that the rebellion was only affecting one tribe and it was not of major importance in the context of the colony as a whole. The inevitable consequence of this attitude was for some people not actively engaged to think of it in terms of business as usual. Such an attitude may have helped maintain the confidence of the city of London, but it had a singularly unfortunate effect on the spirits of those in the field. Some cried out for the Templar or a Delatra. These are two generals. Delatra was a French general who fought against the Vietnamese and ultimately got taken down. But most of them would have been sacked, either of these men, within days. Altogether, there were plenty of frustrations, but men in my organization were young and very fully occupied. Furthermore, life involved endless activity in the open air, much of which both was interesting and exciting, but it was not likely that the field intelligence assistants worried over as much whether they were providing information in exactly the form which the police and the army required. They were doing their best in achieving an increasing amount. That was good enough for them, and rightly so. Let me get down to what I want. I was always on the lookout for a breakthrough, but I could not think of how to achieve one, although I did not know it at the time, but I was waiting for something to turn up. Eventually, something did. One day towards the end of March 1954, we were interrogating a prisoner called George, who had been captured in the Kikuyu Garden in action with the gang near the forest edge. We were not giving much success with the interrogation because George kept telling lies and we did not know when he was doing so. One of the secrets of effective interrogation is, of course, to know the answer to most of the questions asked so as to trip the prisoner up when he lies. After a time, the prisoner becomes resigned to telling the truth because he does not want to be caught and his lies too frequently. And it is then when the interrogator slips into the questions which he particularly wants answered truthfully. Unfortunately, we did not know enough about George and his former friends to work this system effectively. I remember that some weeks earlier we found a book on the body of a gang member in the same general area from which George had come, and which contained details of men and weapons. Thinking that this book might refer to George's gang, I shouted in English to the clerk, who was sitting at the far end of the room, to throw it to me, and I caught it as it came over George's head. George had not noticed the clerk, who had not been in the room when I started the interrogation, nor had he understood what I had said. All that he knew was that I said a few incomprehensible words and a book which he imagined to be in the possession of his gang. Possession of his gang leader deep in the forest, had suddenly appeared out of thin air and was going to be used to prove him a liar. To his mind, this represented a strong magic. And from that moment on, he was my man, whose sole aim was to do all possible to help me. After completing the interrogation of George, we took George out on patrol. He pointed out several huts near the forest edge where his gang used to go for supplies. He went over pretending to still be in the gang, and the owner gave him some interesting bits of news. Over the next few days, we did the same thing in other areas where George's gang was known to work, making up a suitable story each time to account for George's presence. On one occasion, a contact made in this way told George that the supply group from his gang was laying up nearby. George went and met them and led them back to where we lay in wait so that they would be able to engage them with our weapons. In the subsequent skirmish, we killed or captured all the members of this group. We had in fact done something far more important than that. We at last had broken through the last great divide and developed background information represented by George's knowledge, the knowledge of a supporter's identity, into a contact information. Eric Holyoke. Oh no, let me keep going. Eric Holyoke was the man chiefly responsible for exploiting this breakthrough when it eventually came. Because he had been considered too young to be a field intelligence assistant, he had been designated as an interrogator for my area. And in order to fulfill his function efficiently, he had collected together 8 loyal Kikuyus, coons, to act as guards for any prisoner which might be passed to him for interrogation. These were the men who had built huts around my house and who had fortified the whole complex as a defended post. He had been involved in taking George out of his early patrols and had been responsible for thinking up stories which George told his contacts. Eric soon found that there were grave difficulties in making up convincing stories to account for the presence of one stray gang member wandering on his own. So George told a team of our loyal Kikuyus to dress and act like Mau Maus. Eric would go with George and with some of our team and hide near the known gang supporter. He would then send George and the team, all of whom were acting as Mau Mau, to talk to the supporter, who might put them in contact with the group from a gang. The team would then talk to the gang before returning to Eric, who would direct the military or police patrol onto them, or note down information for future use if that seemed more satisfactory. Soon after we started doing this, our team fell in with the real gang before Eric had broken away and taken cover. But in the dark, the real gang failed to take notice of his presence. Realizing he would soon be discovered, he ordered his team to attack the real gang, which, being taken by surprise, was easily overcome. From this incident, we reckoned that if we disguised ourselves with face blackening and wigs, and we put some yellow dye in our eyes, we could pass off as Africans in the dark and accompany our team. This would be advantageous from the point of view of getting good firsthand information. Thus was born the pseudo gang system, which we enlarged over the coming months, recruiting additional ex-terrorists like George as we went along. Sometimes I accompanied Eric on these operations in order to get firsthand experience, but I was rather a liability because of my uncertain grasp of the language, and he never exactly welcomed the help which I so anxiously proffered. One morning, a few months after George's arrival, I was having breakfast with Eric Holyoke on the veranda of our house. It had been a wet night, but the clouds had passed and the shafts of the brilliant sunlight shone through the raindrops on the roses that sparkled like diamonds. The air was intensely clear. Trees, huts, and rocks several miles away looked like finely modeled ornaments in a cabinet, an illusion which can only be understood properly by people who lived in East Africa. In the front of us, on a lawn, a small bluebird was pecking at the grass. A few hundred yards away, 3 or 4 kites circled, hopefully over the dukkha where the Africans were skinning a goat. The sharpness of the air and the beauty of the scene would have simulated the appetite of an invalid, let alone 2 active men enjoying in retrospect the excitement of previous events. We've been discussing ways of making our camp more secure from attack, which was a common topic of our conversation between us. I'm going to skip here. After a while, we changed the subject and started talking about the operations in the Thika district, which the local field intelligence assistant was engaged in, helped by Eric. The object of this operation was to destroy a small but exceptionally nasty gang of 15 that had been terrorizing the labor on the coffee farms bordering the native reserve. The native reserve is the Bantustan, the concentration camp for the Kenyans that the British set up, where hundreds of thousands of people died or suffered or were used for forced slave labor. Since Easter, they had killed nearly 70 loyalists. On several occasions, we had provided information to the army, but on each occasion, something had gone wrong. As a result, the result was the army was losing faith, and the Thika Special Branch, and we in turn were becoming convinced that the soldiers always mucked up information collected at the expense of much effort and risk. We therefore decided to release no more information about the gang until we could get them into such a position that the army could not possibly make a mess of. The main reason for the survival of these terrorists was that we had been unable to make contact with our pseudo gang. We knew where the terrorist supporters were, and we sent various members of our team to meet them, pretending to be visitors from Nairobi or emissaries from the forest. Whatever the story, the local Mau Mau committee received them courteously and promised to arrange a meeting with the gang. But a meeting never took place. Eventually, the military intelligence officer for Thika devised a long-term plan. Near the area which the gang operated were a number of farms which had no Mau Mau committee on them because they had all been arrested some months earlier. We decided to introduce a pseudo gang who would tell the laborers that they had been forced out of their normal area in Kiambu. Our gang would ask for support and encourage the formation of a normal chain of committees to provide it. Once the system was operating freely, he would arrest all the supporters of the real gang from the other group of farms. He had hoped that the real gang would be forced into getting supplies from the committees which he had set up to support our pseudo gang. Our gang would then be well within their rights to demand a meeting with the terrorists in order to coordinate operations. The early stages of the operations went well. Our pseudo gang found the laborers in the area only too willing to provide support to the support, and the supporters of the real gang were removed according to the plan. We then suffered a setback because the real gang went to the Fort Hall Reserve instead of moving into the area which we had prepared for them. Luckily, they came back after a few days and made contact with the new committees. 10 days later, one of our men met 3 of theirs in the hut of the leading supporter. On this occasion, it was arranged that the leader of our group, with a bodyguard of 3, should at last meet the real gang. The matter being discussed between Eric and myself was the composition of this team to go to the meeting, which was due to take place the following night. The leader would have to be George, and the Thika field intelligence assistant, suitably dressed up, as would be the second member. These 2 had been part of the pseudo gang, which had built up the committees and were known to the supporters. Eric had agreed to go along and keep the field intelligence assistant's company, and he had undertaken to provide a good man from our team to make up the number. We ran through the names of our men to see who would be most suitable, but there seemed to be a snag with each one. We had finished eating and still undecided when an African came wandering from behind the house. He was carrying a dustbin full of pushu, which he was scattering on the ground for the chickens. He wore a khaki shirt hanging outside and a ragged pair of shorts. He looked undernourished, and his legs, which were swollen, were covered with jungle sores. His hair hung to his shoulders and the plate of the hardcore terrorist. His nose was flat and wide. He had huge, gentle eyes that were completely out of keeping with his general appearance. His name was Kamau, and when he saw us at the table, he gave us a nervous but friendly smile. Kamau had been captured a week earlier during the battle in the forest, and we had kept him on after his interrogation was finished to see whether he would be suitable use for the pseudo gang. For the first few days, he had been confined, but he was now allowed to walk around the compound by himself so as to get the feeling that we trusted him. In a week or 2, he would go out with another member of our team visiting low-grade informers, and then, with his reliability was proved, he would go on his first pseudo operation. That would have been the normal program at any rate. Eric suddenly said that he would take Kamau as the 4th member of the party. He then produced all the reasons for not doing so and then shot them down one after the other. It was certainly a risk, but Eric had an uncanny knack for knowing Africans. There was no doubt that Kamau looked the part and had more recent experience in the life of the gangs than anyone else on our team. As usual, I agreed with the broad grin and stretched across Eric's pointed face. He rose from the table, and I could not help but wondering how he had ever passed himself off as a Kikuyu. He was well over 6 feet tall and was so slim that he seemed to consist entirely of arms and legs, as an illusion that was heightened by the fact that he seldom wore anything but shorts and a pair of khaki shorts and a little checked shirt. He had a mass of hair. I'm going too fast. He had a mass of fair, tousled hair, which he brushed about once a week, and altogether it would be hard to imagine that anyone that looked less like an African. It is remarkable what a good disguise can achieve. After breakfast, I had to go away on some business or another, and in the event I did not return to our post in 3 days, it was then that Eric told me how his patrol had turned out. On the morning after I had left for Nairobi, Eric had spent an hour more with Kamau going over every detail of the imaginary background of the pseudo gang. In the evening, He dressed Kamau in the old clothes in which he had been captured and set about disguising himself. For he blackened his skin with actor's makeup and put on a black woolly wig. The next came an old pair of trousers and the inevitable Macintosh. He wore brown leather ankle boots made at the Bata shoe factory, a bush hat with a wide brim and 2 strings of colored beads around his neck, a Boy Scout belt with the buckle upside down completed the outfit. By the time he looked the part of a Mau Mau, a terrorist to perfection, even though he was a little on the large side for Kikuyu. Let me just finish. I don't have to finish this chapter. Are y'all getting my point here? Are y'all getting my point? Hi to Seattle. Hi to everybody. They created infiltrator gangs. This is going on in Chicago right now. And they learned to pay off and recruit people, lock up people, and then get people to make a deal in exchange for betraying or hurting other African or black or FB, whatever you want to call us, right? This is the book, Bunch of Five. I'm going to read some more in this. I just want to go back and I'm going to skim through some of the lessons that they learned of using black people to kill black people. Rape. You'd get rape. This is part 5 of a Bunch of Five. This is a manual, actually, that's used in war colleges all over the world, how to get people to kill their own or to kill people like them so the big countries don't have to do it. Studying the experience. So let me see, and this isn't that long, and I'm going to get with Dr. King now. And I just want y'all to hear how they learned to use traitors. Let me see, this is, how many pages this is? This goes from 80 to, okay, I can go through this. And I may not do the whole thing. Peace to everybody. As the Secretary of Defense, Dennis Healy became known as the innovator of the ideas to establish a defense fellowship. Let's skip that. I don't want that. Okay, I'll read this anyway. Defense Fellowship. Each year, 6 or 8 middle-aged officers were selected from 3 services and sent off to a university to study some aspect of defense in the widest sense. Having failed to read the relevant Defense Council instruction, I knew nothing of this until told to volunteer for Defense Fellowship at the end of my tour of duty as a battalion commander. After filling in a few forms, I duly appeared in front of a distinguished board of senior officers and civil servants. Somewhat to my surprise, I was selected to carry out an examination into the steps which should be taken in order to make the Army ready to deal with subversion, insurrection, and peacekeeping operations during the second half of the 1970s. My study was to last for 1 year, and in October 1969, I took up residence at the University College at Oxford, the main university of England. Thanks to the kindness of the Master and Fellows, my work was supervised by Professor Norman Gibbs and Chichele Professor of War. Chichele Professor of the History of War. It might be supposed that any person capable of handling an infantry battalion would have little trouble preparing such a straightforward report, but that is not how it appeared to me at the time. One major problem was that the second half of the 1970s was still 6 years away, and it was difficult to know what sort of counterinsurgency and peacekeeping operations would be likely to confront the army ahead. Another problem was to relate the experience I had gained in Kenya, Malaya, Muscat, and Cyprus to the business of preparing the army for future eventualities. On reflection, in this context, the preparation in this context seemed to mean education and training on the one hand, organization on the other. But before taking the subject down this way, it would obviously be necessary to isolate the essentials of countering insurgency and peacekeeping. There's never been much doubt, and the main characteristic that distinguishes the campaigns of insurgency from other forms of war is that they're primarily concerned with the struggle for men's minds, since only by the succeeding in such a struggle with the large enough number of people can the rule of law be undermined and constitutional institutions overthrown. I'll read that again, people. The main characteristic that distinguishes campaigns of insurgency from other forms of war is that they are primarily concerned with the struggle for men's minds. A struggle over mind. I want to say to you, we black people suck in the psych war. We suck at using our minds. We're too damn emotional. We're too oriented towards feelings, how I feel about someone. It's almost never, something legit. That's not us. I'm just saying that to you. Believe me, we do not, we suck at it. We suck at thinking. We suck at minds and struggling. We are not doing it. In particular, this is another reason why pork chop feminists and pork chop feminism has no place in black leadership. I don't care how loud, I don't care what sorority, any broad who's driven by emotion, any toxic simp pimp where everything is his penis or who he can sleep with, when your people are at risk, this is why we're losing. We will never win as long as the struggle isn't over your mind and spirit. And anything that attacks your mind and spirit, alcohol, drugs, promiscuity, immorality, bullshit cultic religions, personality cults, if it's not working to emancipate your mind and body and empower you, it is dangerous. And we love things that are not good for us because we see license. Sleeping with 100 people is liberty. You can sleep with as many people as you want in a concentration camp. You won't get out. Struggle over people's minds. Violence may play a greater or lesser part in the campaign, but it should be used very largely in support of ideas. We have senseless violence. The black community is very violent around senseless shit. There's never any violence over stuff that makes sense. Almost never. I'm not even encouraging violence, but my God, why can't a pedophile get beaten up in Chicago? Why can't people in human trafficking get beaten up? Why is it the good church mother gets shot in the head on the way to church? Someone who ain't even, all they do is love everybody. We got it all wrong, man. We got it all wrong. We got it all wrong. Look, in a conventional war, the reverse is usually more the case, and propaganda is normally deployed in support of our might. Although the ultimate aim of an insurgent organization is to overthrow a government or force it to do something it does not want to do, it will first have to get the backing of a proportion of the population. If it is to stay in being and to fight, insurgents are bound to rely to a considerable extent on the people for money, shelter, food, and information. Insurgents therefore need to build up a program in which violence is carefully balanced by political, psychological, and economic measures. If it is to be effective, and the population as a whole, rather than the government, is likely to be the target, especially in the early stages of the struggle. Often insurgents do things which seem pointless or even damaging to their own cause when viewed in the context of harming the government. But in fact, the actions in question may be solely concerned with achieving support from the population by coercion or persuasion. In this connection, there is little doubt that terrorism is a potent form of persuasion. It is sometimes described as armed propaganda. Mm. Ooh. Sorry about that. I had to get some water. This book is kicking my behind. This book is old, y'all. The particular form in which an insurgent campaign takes is likely to depend on its surroundings. If a country contains mountains or large forested regions, it may be possible for insurgents to build up a sort of revolutionary army, which it can ultimately take on the forces of the government in battle. If, on the other hand, there is an adequate cover in the countryside, but large areas of urban development, a campaign relying mainly on political and economic attrition brought about by propaganda, sabotage, and a low level of violence is likely to be more effective. Cities are particularly well suited to this form of struggle because they provide a large reservoir of people who can be manipulated into producing propaganda in the form of riots or marches, because journalists and television teams are quickly on the scene to report it. Furthermore, there's a heavy concentration of targets for sabotage around the city and plenty of prominent people such as politicians, diplomats, and judges to murder. Where a country combines large areas to cover together with cities, the revolutionary armies can be built up and the countryside, whilst the cities can be used to supply as a supply and recruiting base for the insurgent movement, for making propaganda, and for diverting government forces away from the country at critical moments in order to guard against sabotage or demonstrations. The first thing that must be apparent when contemplating the sort of action which the government facing an insurgency should take is that there can be no such thing as a purely military solution, because insurgency is not primarily military activity. At the same time, there's no such thing as a wholly political solution either, short of surrender, because the very fact that the state of insurgency exists implies that violence is involved, and it will have to be countered to some extent, at least by the use of legal force. Political measures alone might have prevented the insurgency from occurring in the first place, but once it has taken hold, the politics and force, backed up by economic measures, will have to be harnessed together for the purposes of restoring peaceful conditions. And this brings me to the most important point. It is fatally easy to underestimate the ability of a small number of armed men to exact support from exposed sections of the population by threats. There's always a temptation to delay using forces of the law against subversive elements because of the danger that it will drive uncommitted people into supporting them. But neither the government pronouncements nor the loyalty of the people will avail if the terrorists are willing to build up their organizations unchecked. Over and over again in Kenya, Malaya, and Cyprus, and many other countries, it has been seen that members of the public cannot stand up to terrorism unprotected. Anyone who has looked on the miserable heaps of human wreckage left behind by execution squads knows why this is so. Certainly, the use of force against terrorists must be carefully worked out in conjunction with measures designed to mitigate any unfavorable impact which it may have on people's attitudes, but it cannot be avoided altogether, and a certain risk of polarization may have to be accepted in order that people should feel that something is being done to protect them. It can be said, therefore, an effective counterinsurgency campaign should consist of the mixture of political and economic measures combined with operations of the forces of law. It can be seen that the relative importance of various different sorts of measures have to be tailored to the situation the same way as insurgents tailor their campaigns to the surrounding. In practice, if an insurgency represents anything more than a very minor disturbance, it is probably fair to say that the sum of the political and economic measures necessary to combat it will involve a whole business of the government in one form or another. In other words, the overall plan of a campaign should not be regarded as an operational matter, but primarily as a major function of government, and the form in which it takes will result from the consideration of the insurgents' aims, strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities which present themselves to both sides in relation to the factors as terrain and urban development. I want to skip down. I want to skip something. Hold a second. I want to stop for a second because y'all need to get this. I'm not going to read anymore. But insurgencies and resistance against insurgencies is all about attacking. It's a struggle over the mind of the people. What this man learned in Kenya and everywhere else was that he could get people who had weak minds to do the work and to do their own repression. And this is, there's a book I have here. If you think Kitson is unusual, this is another book. You can probably get a copy. It's called Promise of Peril. It's a very good book. It's written, I'll just share a little bit of it with you. And I'm going to do this psych warfare thing, but I'll put these up here just so you can, if you think that this guerrilla warfare and psych stuff isn't, let me see. I'm going to put this up, Promise of Peril, and I'll put it up here. You'll find that the topic, yeah, I have his name. We'll put a book up here for y'all. This book, and I'll hold this up so you can see it. It's Promise of Peril. It's one of my favorite books. It was written about 1970. Promise of Peril, the Black College Student in America. And I'll share some of this with you. And by the way, let me just read this intro, and I'm going to get to the psychological warfare thing. This is going on right now. This is happening right now. In fact, psychological warfare is being waged on Black people to get vaccinated. And by the way, there are all kinds of things you can take to fight corona. But this book, Promise of Peril, it's written by William R. Corson. He was doing counterinsurgency. He was literally doing what Kitson was doing to fight against insurgents. Uh, Corson was in the United States military fighting against Vietnamese, which was an insurgent fighting against the revolutionary movement for the Vietnamese to free themselves from the Americans, first the French, then the Japanese, then the French, and then the Americans. And literally, there is a psych war going on against Black people. That we're the only people not engaged in liberating our minds. We're not doing that. Telling me about the great stuff in Asia and all that great stuff in Africa, I'm for it. Yes, people are Black, great. Egypt, Nile Valley, all that. How the hell do you fight someone that's messing with you right now? And when people have all these books on Egypt, they need to sell those books and buy some weaponry to protect themselves living in America. I mean, my house is Kemet. Real talk. I want you to know of this book. You can find it on Amazon. You might be able to get it for about $5-6. It's a worthwhile book. It's dated, but it shows you the mindset of how Black people had to be co-opted and prevented from standing up. Okay. This book, Promise of Peril, it's an easy read, but let me read some of this to you. And I'm going to put it aside because I'm going to do psychological warfare, and then I'm going to do Dr. King. And then I get to go back to sex. So I'm going to do psychological warfare. Wait a minute. I'm going to do sex. No, I'm going to do psychological warfare and Blackness. Then I'm going to go back to feminism. I enjoy attacking feminism. Okay. It's time for Black men to rebel against that shit. And Black women need to stop being feminists. Quit. This is from Promise of Peril by William R. Corson. This book may be likened to a sonar system, reporting the sounds which, although still below the threshold of our hearing, are already changing the structure and meaning of the race-related problems of our society. The sounds are the voices of the Black college students as they express their expectations, aspirations, plans, and fears. The unifying theme of this book is the proposition that the Black college students' future is imperiled on the one hand by institutional white racism and on the other by the possibility of their participation in a revolution led by Black revolutionaries who have given up all hope for peace and freedom between the races in America. I have tried to look at the dimension of the fears, perceptions, and values, the opportunities and the goals of the Black college students. I take a broad view, not only of the alternatives and their effect on Black students, but on their effect on the totality of American society. Without the students, Black extremists cannot mount their revolutions. I'll read that again. Without the students, the extremists cannot mount their revolutions. Without thinking Black people, you can't have an insurgency. Let me translate with Nixon. You got to get the minds. We got to get in the minds of these Black folks, or else we got a problem. Someone else may get in their minds. Okay. With them, they may be able, without the students, the Black extremists cannot mount their revolution. With them, they may be able to. Without the help of Black college students, white and Black moderates will not be able to resolve the racial conflicts which divide our nation. The Black college student then is a key variable. The number of Black people committed to the revolution is small. Their organization is fragmented. Their ideology, simply rule or ruin. Yet if they succeed in recruiting the Black college generation, they can multiply their numbers, centralize their organization, and refine and effectively communicate their ideologies. Revolution then will become possible. I have reminded the pressures that may cause Black college students to abandon their hopes of fulfilling themselves within our present American society and turn instead to an open ended violence of a race war. And I have outlined the techniques available for the Black Revolution. Finally, some ways which are suggested to reach a more peaceful tomorrow. My debt to the students at Howard University, without whom this book never could have been written, is very great. This book is, at best, only a partial repayment for the honesty and candor with which they taught their teacher. My motive in writing this book has been my conviction that the views of my Black students must be brought to a wider audience. What they are saying is the promise and peril of American society, and their voices are not strident or desperate. My intention is not to speak for the Black college students, but rather transmit their personal wisdom and their dreams for a better America, which they are willing to share with those who come to listen. They are, of course, absolved from responsibility for any errors made by me in trying to report their views. Their detailed criticisms, comments, always made in a spirit of honest give and take, improve the manuscript's content substantially. But even more important to me has been the stimulation of daily contact with them as a teacher, counselor, as a friend. Let me see. Chapter 1. And I'm not going to do all this, but I'm going to do pieces of this. In the cacophony of our racial problems, if there is one voice we should listen to, is that of the Black college student. In writing this book, I have listened to that voice and trying to find the answer to the question, what are the Black students really saying? And what do they stand, where do they stand in relationship to a potential Black revolution? The answers are both encouraging and alarming. Encouraging because the Black college student is inclined to reject revolution and violent confrontation as a means to reach his place in society. Alarming because he is being increasingly subjected by Black activists and potential revolutionaries to a wide variety of pressures that could possibly serve to radicalize him anyway. There is no assurance that the Black student will continue to reject revolution. He is skeptical of American society's ability and pessimistic about its willingness to deliver on past promises made to Negroes. If his skepticism becomes conviction and his pessimism becomes desperation, revolution might well seem to be a plausible alternative. It was an extended conversation with the late Bernard Fall in South Vietnam about the possibility of a Black revolution in the United States that led me first to an examination of the attitudes of the Negro Marines under my command and the Marine Corps Combined Actions Program, and then to take a teaching position at Howard University in Washington. Fall, who at the time of his death was on leave from his post as a professor of international relations at Howard, had come to Vietnam to do research for his new book about the U.S. role in the Vietnam War. In connection with his research, he came to the number 3 Marine Amphibious Force headquarters on the morning of February 21st, 1967, to discuss the Combined Actions Program with me. Our conversation ranged from the problems of pacification to the higher conduct of the war, but Fall kept returning to his theory of a parallel between the Vietnamese revolutionary experience and the American racial situation. Because he was almost completely obsessed with the concept that Vietnam is a perfect illustration of the West's inability to engage in counter-revolutionary action, I tended to discount the completeness of his Vietnam parallel. He admitted that the historical analog of Vietnam with the United States was not complete, But he was adamant on one point, that the current racial turbulence in the United States was not just one more chapter in the history of our race relations, but represented a significant departure from the previous revolutionary process to one of real revolution. When I pressed him on the point, he said, "I know I'm going to be unscientific. I could argue the point on the basis that many of the same things affecting the American Negro, such as the lack of upward mobility, inferior education, and economic exploitation, were responsible for turning the Viet Cong into a viable revolutionary force. But it's more than that. There's a qualitative change underway, which is not just quantifiable, but which is nonetheless very real." Then he laughed and added, "I shouldn't have to explain to you your nose for revolution is better than mine. Whether my nose for revolution is better than Bernard Fall is beside the point." But he was right. The smell of revolution is less real than the smell of a decaying corpse. It was just that we are better able to identify the latter than the former. Because Fall had been teaching at Howard University, where 93% of the student body is Black, I suggested that he was reflecting on the attitudes and opinions of his students. He confirmed this and added that although there was not as yet a Condorcet among Black students, let me explain to you what this is. Hey, Zelensky. Hi, everybody. Condorcet. Let me explain to you who that is. And this is why we have this caste class garbage in the Black community, and it's facilitated. Why the Boulay and other people are taken care of is to prevent the emergence of a Condorcet. Listen to this. The reference to Condorcet, who was one of the intellectual leaders of the French Revolution, provided the necessary justification to the bourgeois class to support the revolution's violence. Is most appropriate because among the Black activists such as Cleaver, Brown, that's H. Rap Brown, and Huey Newton, is not one who's been able to fully capture the Black college student's imagination. What Mr. Corson is saying, and what the system has worked on very hard, which is why you see certain chosen, frozen, coon Black people get help and support, is because they're trying to prevent cooperation between the Black bourgeoisie and the Black masses. There's a reason certain people don't get shot, picked up, certain things don't happen. It isn't because they love them. It's because there's a terror. If you ever get an articulation to real change among the shallow, fake-ass Black people that I was reading about in the Black bourgeoisie, with grassroots Black folks that want real change, you've got a real situation happening. And this man in 1970, 51 years ago, is saying, hey, look, we cannot have Black people who are educated give a damn about Black people that are not educated. And you can't have the demands of the Black folks who are catching the most hell be heard and received by successful Black people. And part of what happens in this book is Corson lays out the need to help change things to buy off, or the term is used, bifurcate or divide people, to make certain that certain Black people have, certain Black people achieve. You see a Black governor or a Black mayor or a Black senator to keep people, right? To keep those people from ever getting frustrated to the point of helping Black grassroots people. And in fact, with this vaccination, all the other things, notice that the elite Black people have offered no leadership, no outcry, no mention, to show you how successfully the top 10% of Black people have been bought off, even though they claim to be the leadership and everything else, to not even say anything about unapproved drugs being used and targeted towards our population. Even Joe Biden, as much as he hates Black folks, will have a couple of coons in the room, coons on the call, to make it look good. The late Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, when talking about affirmative action and the Michigan University Law School. In her opinion, she wrote down that it is in the interest of a nation to have the appearance of a diversified elite. Not a diverse elite, but the appearance. There has to be some sense that there isn't one group that's all at the bottom and other groups are all at the top. It is a form of psychological warfare for you to see Kamala Harris, who is not a black woman, being touted, or big bloated ass Chick-fil-A 50 piece Stacey Abrams and others and Clanburn. These monsters are being put up to deceive and trick us that we've moved further than what we really have. And these people were helped into place because there is a psychological war being fought against black people spiritually, mentally, on all levels. And we're not fighting. We're just getting the shit beaten out of us. And I would even say to you, any group of people, even if they call themselves conscious, if they're not promoting a degree of awareness or self-respect, right? We are being undermined by even people that we look at. So like the bunch of five for Nixon, or what you're reading here, Promise of Peril, there is a decided effort to prevent an awareness that this is why the drugs. I got some books on drugs in here. Just pretty soon I'm gonna get into drugs and black folks. The little bit, I don't have to do all of it, but I'll do some. Okay. Let me keep doing this. And I repeat, he confirmed this and he added, although there was not yet a Condorcet among black students, there were many willing to play the role of Robespierre as an American version of the French Revolution's reign of terror. When we parted, he to meet his death in less than an hour from a Viet Cong mine while riding in a Marine Corps Jeep along the street without joy, he left me with the final disquieting thought. Bill, you're involved with the wrong counter-revolution. It's too late for Vietnam. And perhaps too late for America. If any hearts and minds can really and should be won, they are black, and they are in the United States. Death has a way of etching a man's last remarks into one's conscience and memory. Between the time of Bernard Fall's death in February 1967 and my departure from Vietnam on September 1st, I was often forced to recall his words about racial violence and revolution in America. It seemed to me that the incompetence and intransigence of the government of South Vietnam and dealing with the political, social, economic, religious, and racial discrimination which provided the Viet Cong with the fuel they needed to drive their revolutionary engine was being reflected in the news from the United States. During this period, the attitudes of the Negro Marines who were serving in the combined action platoons in native hamlets were very revealing because they showed, among other things, that they could see a similarity between the problems of the Vietnamese peasant and those of the black poor in the United States. Since the Negro Marines were so sensitive to the Vietnamese peasants' problems, we made a conscious effort to recruit a high proportion of Negroes into the program. This was a calculated risk because in spite of the vast public relations effort on the part of the military establishment to portray racial harmony between blacks and whites during the combat operations, racial hostility among American servicemen was never far from the surface in Vietnam. We didn't want to create a critical black mass in the CAPs. This possibility was lessened somewhat by screening both black and white volunteers from the program to remove the military's equivalent of a racist, that is, a gook hater, even though the risk was not totally eliminated. But the gamble was well worth the risk. For both word and deed, the Negro Marines did a monumental job, and not once did they betray the trust conferred on them by the peasants. Most of these black Marines, who only a year or so previously had been part of the Negro problem in the United States, positively demonstrated the true meaning of empathy. In the interactions with the Vietnamese people, they acquired a dignity and purpose for which the most part have been denied them in American society. In an attempt to understand what the Cap Marines felt about living among the Vietnamese peasants, we conducted an in-depth study of their attitudes. The results showed that both black and white Marines recognized the peasants as a group of people who, through no fault of their own, were systematically oppressed by every institution in Vietnam except their own families and the self-ordained unofficial Hamlet hierarchy. And they were easily persuaded, largely by themselves, to stand on the side of the people against the government's pervasive institutional repression. However, the Negro Marines' perception extended to a genuine personal identification with the peasants. Time after time, we were amazed at how the Negro Marines knew almost instinctively what should and could be done to improve the lot of the people in a specific hamlet. There was no need to unduly glamorize or make heroic the actions of Cap Marines, both black and white, and meeting the people on common ground. They did it, and their actions speak for themselves. But do these actions have any meaning outside of Vietnam? I think they do, for they illustrate that the root of the dissension is the struggle for the individual to discover, affirm, and maintain his personal identity in the face of the challenges posed by a hostile environment. In this personal battle, the Negro Cap Marines were able to fight for the first time in their lives on a colorblind battlefield against all that threatened or appeared to threaten their sense of self. They won that fight, and an understanding of their struggle has meaning for the purposes of this book. The Negro Cap Marines learned in the crucible of war that I cannot survive without thou. To relate to one's personal dialectic with life to others is tremendously difficult. And in the process, each Negro Marine came to understand that the Negro problem was also his problem. This was the main thing I learned from my association with these young men. Given a responsibility for others, they acquired, on the other hand, a personal sense of identity on the other, and appreciation for the worth of group solidarity. Together, these two factors are a powerful social force to help prevent discrimination of any kind. One particular perceptive Negro corporal expressed this abstraction and its implications very succinctly when he told me, "What I have learned here is well worth dying, because I know for sure that I am a man, and nowhere, never again, am I going to let another man put his foot on my neck or on my people's neck." In varying degrees, each of the Negroes expressed the same sentiments. There wasn't a corresponding commitment to any organizational movement as a means to ensure their survival or well-being, but neither was there an outright rejection of any group, no matter how extreme. Several of the Black Marines showed me the Black Power literature that finds its way unerringly to Vietnam in substantial quantity. The material was carefully chosen. It was not subversive per se, nor was it designed to recruit the Negro servicemen in advance into an organization. It was more a soft sell pitch to remind Black servicemen of what was going on at home among his people, and to point out the option voiced by Benjamin Franklin 2 centuries ago. We shall either all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately. The Marines' reaction to this literature was consistent. They believed that it was a result of their accomplishment in Vietnam that they would be able to make it back on the States, and if they ran into trouble, once they were out of the service, they would decide whether to join the movement. In the winter and spring of 1967, without notable exception, the Black Marines were skeptical, but they were not unduly pessimistic. However, by the summer of 1967, as the events surrounding domestic and racial violence evolved, they had shifted from a mood of skepticism to one of defiant resignation, that is, almost a belief in the inevitability of a physical confrontation between themselves and the white establishment. I have dwelt at some length on the attitudes of black Marines towards their position in a post-Vietnam War America because their show me attitude represented in a microcosm the response of those blacks who were able to stand somewhat outside the arena of racial confrontation and deferred taking a stand on one side or the other. In this sense, the 1965 Negro Marine and the black college student were in similar positions. However, since that time, the situation has changed markedly for the black college student and for the members of all other hitherto uncommitted groups because they have been subjected to ever increasing pressures to get off the morally neutral seventh rung of hell. In retrospect, although the black American skepticism seems to have been a self-fulfilling prophecy, the significance of the 1967 racial violence was misperceived by white America not only because of a blindly naive faith in the inevitability of an evolutionary improvement in race relations, but also because white America wants to misperceive the reality. The Great Society's laws were on the books. The leaders of the civil rights movement were preaching nonviolence. America was in the midst of an economic boom, yet the Great Society's war on poverty was, like the war in Vietnam, stalemated. Such upcoming black leaders such as H. Rap Brown, Huey Newton, Stokely Carmichael, and Eldridge Cleaver discarded Martin Luther King's New Testament-inspired call for brotherly love in favor of the Old Testament command of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And the economic boom was less than real, and for the prices of all things continued to rise. If 1967 can be likened to a prologue of America's own Greek tragedy, then the events of 1968 and 1969 constitute the first act of the most significant revolution of the 20th century. And the pell-mell rush of political events of 1968, the gradual expansion of organized black revolutionary militancy, was somewhat obscured by widespread and largely spontaneous violence following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., which may or may not have been a genuine revolutionary significance. What is clear is that regardless of the course of the future racial violence in the United States, never again will the relations between blacks and whites be the same. The opportunities of the past to solve racial problems on the basis of mutual trust between blacks and whites, as advocated by Dr. King, are gone forever. We have fewer options now because the days following Dr. King's death and the protective mask worn by many American Negroes was ripped away to show clearly for the first time the extent of their rage and hatred. And once these emotions have been sprung out of the Pandora's box, there's no way or no one who could easily put them back. The murder of Robert F. Kennedy on June 5th, 1968 was a capstone to black despondency and despair. The death of popular leaders always produces social trauma, but it is usually temporary. It is usually temporary unless those leaders are identified closely with socially alienated groups. Both Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy were, and it took their deaths to show the depth of social alienation among all members of the black community. With the death of Senator Kennedy, the blacks lost the last white man in a position of leadership in whom they had any confidence. The signals of a genuine, deep-seated social alienation, never especially clear in the incipient stages of revolution because they are brief and emitted in a random fashion. However, if one is attuned to the signal's characteristics, it's possible to recognize them and distinguish their intensity. In this regard, a friend of the Justice Department with whom I shared Bernard Fall's apprehensions about a black revolution in the United States suggested if Howard University was not the site of a revolutionary transmitter, it was at least serving as a revolutionary incubator. At the time of our conversation, December 1967, Howard seemed the most unlikely candidate for a revolutionary incubator because Congress's close rein on its finances and its conservative, almost apolitical reputation. We discussed this point in some detail, and my friend finally suggested that I check it out for myself. because of the matters of revolutionary information once or twice removed from the sources, often conflicting or misleading. I'll read it. Thus, I applied for a position as professor of economics at Howard University because I felt that the attitudes of the students in the field of economics would reflect more clearly the dilemma of those who are not yet committed to a revolutionary course of action. During my interview about faculty position in January 1968, I was inclined to dismiss the idea that Howard University was anything more than a university struggling to live within its means and provide a reasonable education for Black students. However, between the time I applied for appointment to the faculty and my acceptance, the roof caved in on the university and its faculty leaders on the morning of March 1st, 1968. Several hundred students seized a number of university buildings and presented their demands for change to the administration authorities. This action was the first of its kind on a college campus in the United States, and very significant in the way it was different from all the succeeding student uprisings. Although its unique features were overlooked in the months that followed, it was assumed that merely the forerunner to seize, confront, and provoke incidents staged by the Students for a Democratic Society at Columbia and other universities later in 1968. The Howard takeover was characterized by strict organization and discipline, which were usually absent in student administration confrontations, which are certainly not automatic byproduct of social protest because they require hard work and a clear understanding of objectives sought. The students' prime objective was Howard's seizure of substantial improvement in the quality of their education, and their demands were carefully worked out in advance of the takeover. The entire operation was almost a textbook model of an exercise in social reforms. The seizure was swift and efficient. There was no damage to any university property throughout the 5 or 6 days of occupation. The switchboard was manned and operated. The internal discipline was maintained by the students themselves. Food was brought on a regular schedule. The students left the door open for dialogue and discussion with the university authorities, and when the administration indicated it was willing to explore with them what could be done to meet their demands, the seizure was called off as quickly as it had been launched. The students apparently believed that the university would work with them to solve the problems in good faith, but as the people hired made clear, it was not to be the case. Shortly after Howard's administration had accepted for further study the striking students' demand, I formally accepted the previously tendered faculty appointment. At this time, one fact was obvious: the university's administration and faculty leadership had become literally petrified in the face of Black student power. So petrified that they revealed to me that a newcomer in their midst, that they believed that the student takeover had been part of the sinister communist conspiracy. They said that the professors, who were secret communist agents, had come out of the woodwork to support the students, and that the student demands were totally unreasonable. The term unreasonable was not yet in vogue and was based on a Marxist view of shared authority in running a university, and that non-students were using Howard as a center for distribution of Black power literature to other Negro colleges. In short, the only influence they could detect in the seizure was a communist conspiracy. Another revealing aspect of the potentially revolutionary situation at Howard was the students' reaction to the assassination of Martin Luther King. Although civil disorder followed, the killing was widespread and seemingly spontaneous throughout the country, especially in Washington. And although Howard straddles one of the ghetto corridors in Washington, in which there was extensive damage during the outburst, the overwhelming majority of Howard students took no part in the rioting, and student activist leaders went to great lengths to keep the campus cool. There are several possible explanations for the students' behavior. Either they were the more responsible than the rioters, their grief over Dr. King's death overcame any tendency they might have to run with the riotous herd, or there was a conscious design on the part of the activist student leaders to avoid punitive reaction from the police and troops against them, because the riot at that time was not part of their basic ideology. Probably all three reasons were contributory, But the third one is especially revealing in a revolutionary context because it reflects a refusal to confront the power structure at a time and place outside of the activist span of effective control. Although it cannot be proved that this was one of the reasons that the students did not participate in the spontaneous riots following Dr. King's murder, it should not be dismissed, for if it did not mark the beginning of change in the form of violent black protests and a more strategic acts of violence and a shift from massive ghetto rioting to urban guerrilla warfare, then the roots of the black revolutionary violence may go far deeper than can be determined from an analysis of a single apparently random acts of violence. Another insight where the student activists at Howard stood in relation to the white power structure revealed in the picture that appeared in the Washington Post April 6, 1968. It showed 6 or 7 students clad in dashikis lowering the American flag in front of the main dormitory and preparing to replace it with the Black Liberation Front's flag. It was symbolically a defiant rejection of the assimilationist view of race relations in the United States. Although this may be mildly interpreted as just another manifestation, the students' pick and impatience to do so is to be deceived about the depth and intensity of a black commitment to unconditional freedom. Before we can resolve the questions of whether the black students are crying out for honesty and justice or putting white America on notice that they will no longer have any hope that America will live up to its stated ideas, are on the verge of being radicalized, we must be sure that what revolution actually is, and not to confuse it with other forms or methods of political change. I don't know how much more I want to do. This is Promise Apparel. Dude's telling you these people worried about black folks tearing stuff up. I want to look in chapter 7 real fast, and then I'm going to move to another book. This is a chapter 7 from Promise Apparel, some suggestions for counter-revolutionary social action. This is where Dude lays out how black folk can be shut down and bought off. And it's a nice little chapter, explains what they have to do to coon out black people. Some suggestions for counter-revolutionary social action. The problems of race and race-related issues can no longer be left to the dictates of a system of natural priorities determined by America's institutional power elites, which, armed with government authority, are largely unresponsive to public need and insulated from any significant criticisms or reform. To persist in our entrenched ways is to invite disaster. There must be a change which will halt the increasing radicalization among our college students, particularly our black students. We must not let their potential for helping us find solutions become a potential for helping carrying out a violent black revolution. The only way to create the climate in which the changes suggested in this chapter can take place, a climate that will encourage reform rather than revolution, is to convince everyone, from the seemingly helpless individual citizen to the power broker, that we must not act from some abstract humanitarian principle, but out of simple self-interest. If we don't, in the not so distant future, our short-sightedness will bring us face to face with uncontrollable disorder. Short-term selfishness and apathy must give way to long-term selfishness, the kind of selfishness that makes each of us want to live in an orderly and truly free democratic society, simply because any other kind may destroy us all. The gap between the challenge and fulfillment is great, and we all need help we all need all the help we can get to get close to it. We need the strength and vitality of the Black community, particularly the college students. But if we don't get it, if we continue our piecemeal stopgap programs full of grandiose promises followed by ineffectual action or none at all, there is at a present a feeling of helplessness and alienation that must be overcome, and to erase it if there must be a commitment to innovative, realistic change by broad-based elite made up of government leaders, the thousands of disturbed and devoted people who work in government, and the millions of concerned and increasingly fearful citizens, and the young, those who are impatient with the status quo and feel that there are no real efforts now being made to cope with our problems. Without such a commitment, the actions suggested here, which are offered only as first steps, not as a full answer to our racial difficulties, will not be carried out, nor will any others. If institutional power structures do not become more responsive to reason, logic, and the practicality of such programs, the Black Revolution will proceed as planned. Basically, there are two aspects of our racial problems that we must deal with: the aspect of the necessity and the social aspect. Necessity has caused revolution when the physical conditions of life deteriorated so far that the masses literally had nothing to lose by attacking the existing regime. Perhaps America has so far been spared from a revolt based on necessity because in its past we've had an abundance of land in relationship to the size of the population, which made it possible for us to supply our basic needs and give us new areas to settle, a safety valve which enabled our citizens to break away from unsatisfactory social conditions. However, today, in spite of a continuing increase in interregional population shifts, there are no more open frontiers waiting to be settled by Americans. More importantly, there is no way for Black Americans to escape physically from their current environments. In large measure, the Black American must live or die where he is today, and what seems like islands of want surrounded by a sea of plenty, however polluted that sea of plenty may be. Poverty and inequality in housing, employment, education create a precondition for revolution because the Black American believes, rightly or wrongly, that the American system has the ability to eliminate these inequalities, and although he has been repeatedly told that they will be eliminated, they have not been. Patience has worn thin, and as a result of rising expectations, in the face of continued frustration with the long, unintended ills of poor housing, lack of jobs, and free education, each of these problems can be solved, but only after we stop the endless phase of problem definition and do the things required to remove the barriers to positive action. Housing. One of the principal barriers to the improvement of ghetto housing is the fact that the ownership of the deteriorating tenements is very profitable because of the perversion in the law, which was originally devised to encourage timely replacement of such capital items as apartment buildings. The slums represent a successful business venture, and that there is an expanding ghetto population with a fixed and in most cities declining supply of inner city residential housing. This situation, together with depreciation loss for newly purchased but not necessarily new capital assets, enables landlords to use the law to block needed reconstruction in the inner cities and to make what must be considered inordinate profits. An example will explain how the process worked. Landlord A buys a tenement with 15 rental units at a purchase price of $200,000 with a down payment of $20,000. 10%, a government-issued mortgage of $180,000. He sets the average rent at approximately $160 a month to produce an annual net rental income of $27,000. For the 15 units, a figure keeps A figure in keeping with the national average of local taxes and amount spent on rental property maintenance of the building with more than 2 rental units in the inner city area and of the rentals of that type of property. Out of his net income, one might expect the landlord to pay some income taxes, but because he's able to charge off the depreciation of his tenements against his current income, he rarely does. We can assume that the tenement is at least 50 years old. More than 70% of all inner city residential dwellings are more than 50 years old, and thus the landlord can declare the remaining life of his tenement to be 10 years to adopt a double declining digit method to gain the maximum amount of depreciation in the shortage period of time. That is, the first year of depreciation allowed is equal to 20% of the property's purchase price. 10 times 10% times 2 times $200,000 or $40,000. And the second year, it is 18% of the property's remaining value. 9% at 2 times is $28,000. At the end of 2 years, or even after the first year, the owner is in the most desirable position to resell his investment, perhaps to a friend, associate, or relative. It is not uncommon to find a ghetto tenement changing hands as many as 6 times in 10 years in order to take advantage of the depreciation gimmick. Now let us assume that the property is sold for the same price, $200,000. Landlord B, who is able to get a similarly insured government mortgage, since there's no shortage of tenants for slum housing, the government loan and the rental income are all but guaranteed. The new purchaser starts the depreciation process all over again. The original owner, who can and does become the third owner after 2 years, is able, under current laws, to net up to $68,000 in tax-free return on his original down payment of $20,000. Either by starting the process all over again with another tenement, perhaps bought from landlord B, or by charging the rest of the unused depreciation, $68,000 on a net income of $54,000 in the 2-year period, off against other income. This is not usually thought of as a loophole, but it works out that way. A profit of $68,000 on a $20,000 2-year investment is handsome enough to keep the nation's slums in business. But in addition, every dollar that the landlord does not spend on repairs and the 2 years he owns the property represents 100% tax-free profit as long as his rental income does not exceed the allowable depreciation charge. See how they're making their money? Which explains why slumlords are so reluctant to repair, rehabilitate, or renovate their property. Thus, the law actually promotes the very ends it was designed to prevent. That is, the continued existence of overaged, inferior housing. Landlords are able to sell and profit at the expense of the poor, and the process worsens already intolerable living conditions. Tax equity, if nothing else, demands an end to this cycle of preferential treatment for those who exploit both black and white poor. The simplest solution is to amend the federal tax laws that disallow depreciation for rental housing units more than 40 years while allowing the provision of the capital gains losses to stand. This would force the slumlord, who often pays no taxes, to pay his fare, and would lower the price of slum dwellings so that it could be more easily replaced. Taking the profit out of slumlordism will not itself solve our ghetto housing problem. But as long as its condition exists, there is no reason to suppose anything of the substance will be done. A second barrier to decent housing is the unwillingness of the building trade unions to enter the 20th century. Former Illinois Senator Paul Douglas, in his extensive study on the nation's housing ills, conducted for the National Commission on Urban Problems, points out the impossibility of building the estimated 26 million units of new housing in the next 10 years, as long as a jumble of special interest building codes and material and labor or utilization restrictions are allowed to continue. There's no need to restate Senator Douglas's findings. They are well known and have not been effectively challenged. But even though the report details the reasons for change, it is not likely to be adopted unless drastic preliminary steps are taken. There's no lack of new technology to solve our problems. There's a lack of leadership at the local, state, and federal level willing to rip down the barriers to action. What I'm going to suggest may sound radical, but represents the how in solving the national housing problem that stems from the local government's inertia and inadequate building codes drawn up in response to trade union pressures. The federal government must bypass the local government in D.C. in dealing with the housing problem there, and in this process create a public pressure for the kind of vigorous action in other cities. Local, state, and federal governments are authorized to exercise the right of eminent domain for school and road construction. However, in Washington, the federal government has added the authority to use eminent domain to acquire land for any purpose considered to be in the public interest or to promote general welfare. Further, Congress can either exercise directly or pass to the executive branch the authority to set aside and replace any and all existing building codes, conditions of work, etc. in the District of Columbia. This represents a great deal of potential power that can be used to break the nation's housing logjam. That is, the Congress and or the executive branch, without any additional authority, exercise the right to eminent domain to condemn every slum in the District of Columbia, buy the land at the price they determine to be fair, and inaugurate a program of urban renewal that calls on every possible phase of technology in order to build a truly model city. The program should not be based on outmoded building codes and restrictive labor practices designed to raise costs and provide featherbed jobs for trade union members, but on new, tested, effective techniques. It is possible to replace Washington's ghetto dwellings with low-cost public housing that is superior to what is currently being erected as private luxury housing at the cost almost 25% below that allowed or authorized for current public housing units. And this housing would soon become completely a paying proposition. Mass-produced quality housing for sale today in several European cities, and it is cheap in comparison with the current U.S. prices simply to construct and maintain, and it can be erected in an assembly line manner that would eliminate most of the physical relocation associated with urban renewal programs. If there was not enough persons in the trade unions who would be willing to work on a project that did not protect their special interests, there are non-union construction workers in the Black community available to do the job, along with equally, if not more, competent electricians, plumbers, and engineers who happen to be members of the armed forces who can be ordered to erect the new buildings. We should remember that in World War II, when we needed ships in a hurry, Rosie the Riveter was successfully brought into shipbuilding, which was characterized by the most restrictive labor practices known anywhere in the United States at the time. The same can be done for housing. I don't know if I want to read all this. I'm ready to change gears. Oh, this goes on and on. Education. I want to hear this thing. He talk about the bullshits. This is what I want. Okay. I skipped a couple of pages. Let me break here. I'm going to come back. In fact, this thing is bright. So I'll get it. How bright is this thing? Yeah, this is bright. Everybody, I'm going to come back maybe in an hour, hour and a half, and pick back up in here. But the next thing we're going to be doing is Dr. King. And I want to do a piece of this psychological warfare. And because I've been at this, so this is almost 2 hours, this hour and 40. From Savage to Negro. I want to do some of this. So we're going to come back in a few. But I need to give my eyes a rest. They're saying, help! So let me stop here. I'll be back in a little bit and we'll keep it moving. But my eyes is saying they need a break. Hey, Eric Shanks. Eric Shanks, this book, Promise of Peril. This is absolutely, this thing is for sale. I think the most you'll pay for it's $10. It's worth reading the mindset of people. How do you prevent black folk from getting pissed and standing up? That's Promise of Peril. Oh God, I did two. I got, I still have some to get through. And I got all y'all up. I got to show y'all this. Oh my God. I got one of these rare books and it's signed. Oh my God. I saw this. I want to thank you. Somebody sent me a copy. This is a book called Apartheid, South African Nazism. I'm going to probably do a little reading so you can see how this apartheid, how all this stuff, the Nazis, all of this is connected to American racism. So this is one I might do some reading in this. I might add this to my mix. I might do about a piece of this. And you can get a hardback copy of this. Anybody that's angry and black. This is a real good book here. The Rediscovery of Black Nationalism by Theodore Draper. This is hardback and I got for $10. You need some ideas for a lot of you boomers, not boomers, some of you like millennials that don't know none of this shit. This is one to get yourself some history. You can get these on either Amazon. I got this on Abe. I got this on Abe. Apartheid, South African Nazism. It's true. And this is on Scamazon. This was nice. I got two. I'm going to break here. And I think this heater on because it's cold. It is cold as hell here. It is knocking me out. So I'm going to come back, do another piece with y'all. Coonbusters, MFM, MFM, MFM. We're going to be doing more. I'm going to be reading from Martin Luther King. I'm going to pick out some pieces from Psychological Warfare just for you to have some idea what the whole idea is. And I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I'm going to look at Psychological Warfare and go through some of it and just talk to you how they lay this stuff out. And you'll start to notice that there's a very key thing. So let me just get this real piece here. I don't want to do too much. I think I'm going to do a little piece of this. And I'm going to skip through some of this. But psychological warfare, it's going on right now. They're using psychological warfare to frighten you to be vaccinated. It's being used. So I think you can get one of these. See if you can get a book. I've got some other books on psychological warfare, but I'm going to take a piece out of this. This is chapter 2, the function of psychological warfare. I don't want to have to explain it to you, but I'll explain what it is. Maybe I'll do some of it. I'll do a little bit of 1 and 2. And I thank everybody in particular on the StreamYard for your great patience with what happened today. With, I couldn't even get my camera to work, my new webcam to work on the on my Apple app for cameras, FaceTime. And today it worked without me turning it on, and it served to shut off my transmission. Now, you can't make this up. Why does it work when I don't turn it on, but why wouldn't it work when I tried to turn it on? It was coming on without me. So they're doing creepy stuff. I'm not afraid. I could care less. 8 books. There are all kinds of people selling books out here. And by the way, I do want to get back to junk. There is some junk. I know I'm doing dense reading, but oh, this little nasty book on interracial sex. Oh, yes, I can't wait to get into that. So let me see. I've got a couple of these. So I will get back to some junk, and there'll be some filth, some old nasty stuff. And I know how black people are. Man, my head hurts from all this information. Man, just talk about pussies and dicks again, Dr. Short. I get you. I know you heavy, man. Okay, anyway. So I'm going to take a break and try to come back. In fact, some of y'all need to go to lunch. Y'all can eat. I don't get to eat. In fact, I'm going to take a quick break and then I'll get back with y'all. So I'll send out a notice again and I'll see. I might even add this black nationalism thing in here. Man, y'all got to give it up. This black genocide book is good. Y'all got to give it to me. Mm. Oh, wow. These old books are dusty and they mess my sinuses up. So, oh yeah, and I got other things. I'm gonna try to, we got to attack feminism. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Which brother hates feminism most of all? You are looking at him. I hate feminism. I don't have any RESPECT for feminism. If you're a feminist, please get off my thread. We don't want you. We can't stand you. Go away. I finally got it. Thank you for your contributions. I got it. This lesbian Satanist, Kate Millett, the mother of modern radical lesbian feminism. I will be reading. We're going to read from the playbooks of the castrating, man-hating women that so many of our stupid, misguided sisters follow. And I'm going to even show you. I was thinking about this. I have a little stuff so we can talk about traitor black lesbians. Many of you traitors, you are. And I'm not sorry if you don't like what I'm saying. Complain until they kick me off this medium. I'll keep using it. This book here is talking about the carpet munching NAACP. Yes, this is the carpet munching NAACP. Different daughters. You want to hear about the lesbian movement. And yes, there's a big carpet munching, swirling Karen carpet munching sister who I'm going to bring up and I'm going to introduce because y'all need to know, yes, black women, when we swing a bat at your asses, it's for a reason. This has happened. This man-hating movement that's killing our community. This has happened on so-called educated black women's watch. It's your fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. I'm tempted. Even if I stop reading, I feel like pulling up a video. Because I keep talking to y'all, and I know when you share with black people, they're not serious a lot of the times. You give them a piece of information, and then they don't do anything with it. They ignore it. So I think while I'm here, let me do this while I take my break. I want y'all to see something. I'm learning how to use this damn here it is, iPad. I'm gonna get this show. I gotta show you black women what y'all doing. A lot of y'all, and it's unforgivable. They're building up Stacey Abrams for fall. Um, let me see if I can find it. Okay, sisters, I'm going to show this while I'm taking my break here, get myself together. Let me see if I can get this video up here. And this is what a whole lot of, like this broad Kizzy, who's pushing this vaccine. They picked up all these black women that are going to help. There have been over 4,000 people seriously injured or killed by the vaccines. And they have a black woman as the face of it. Trust me, if I'm just telling you how I understand the people that stormed the Capitol the other day. If I was a racist white dude living out in, say, Illinois, and I've been seeing this black woman made the vaccine, black woman, black woman, black woman. He already hates black women. Okay, I'm just telling y'all, fools. Then they take their child to get vaccinated, and their wife and a couple people get sick. Y'all don't understand the entitlement complex of a lot of people, and it's unfortunate. I can just tell you, a lot of folks would want to go in with the gun and shoot the nurses, all the black nurses. It's a lot of people don't understand how bad this racial thing. It is satanic. Racism is a Luciferian concept. It is a demonic construct in the minds of many people. Causes them to do great wickedness. There was a black woman in Chicago who had a Latino boyfriend, and she broke it off. He went to the hospital and shot her ass. They didn't show his picture, and they wanted to make it out as a black man because they're constantly trying to make black women dislike black men. And by the way, it was a chunky sister. She had money and all that, but she was a class C sister who didn't really keep herself up in such a way to be tempting. Men are attracted by what they see. So you ugly yourself up and a man's supposed to be attracted to you. You get with the man and start looking ugly and he's supposed to still want you. Who told you that shit? Who told you? And I mean, all big. I mean, I've never seen a fat dude who had a lot of women that didn't have money. He may know how to talk to them, but a big dude, he had to have like a personality. I've seen fat black women with nothing going for them. Nothing. And they thought everybody should want them. And I'm telling you, a big fat dude, he better have some money. He better know how to dress. He better have some kind of swag or something to get him by, because fat on black men isn't esteemed as attractive. Black women don't esteem it. So vice versa, why should black men want a lot of blubber? I mean, hell, what I look like, Captain Ahab? Look, Moby Dick is a fictional book, right? Okay. And I don't like fiction. So I don't want Moby Dick. Please be in shape. Please don't be oversized and think everybody's got to want you. It's not true. It isn't true, black women. It's it's time for us to have a war. And by the way, we've been hearing women's opinions our whole lives: talk shows, television, radio, church. Angry Black Men's Book Club is one of the few places, and that's why I have so many brothers listening, to have a black man just trip on you and say actual shit that we think and feel and we know to be true, that we know that you normally can't say. And I can't work for no university after this because some lesbian feminists say, well, you've heard what he said about women. He said this about women. Right. They write books talking about cutting men's dicks off, killing them. No one says anything to them, right? Man cracks some fat jokes and he can't work anywhere. He's a monster. I couldn't trust him around women. Well, even though he doesn't have a criminal record, well, just it's very disturbing what I've heard him say, right? How come it's never disturbing when these women hate men? How come it's never disturbing? How come that's not a problem? And they put women in charge. And I'm telling you, when I was in elite school, Harvard, man, and they had women that hated men and told that there was nobody a young man could go to if the teacher gave him a bad grade. He's told, well, it's part of life. You're going to get screwed sometimes. I'm just saying. No. Just to spite, I should show this again. I want y'all to see what's coming, y'all, because a lot of our sisters, they don't do comparative analysis when they talk about black men. They really don't, right? What you know about, when you talk bad about brothers, shit, it's always whatever people are saying. Nobody ever really tells y'all that in the real world, outside of this white supremacist cocoon that you're in, where you're protected from reality and shit, a lot of stuff that's normal business here. Black sisters. Uh, Let me get this thing up here. I'm wondering, should I turn it sideways? Will it go sideways? Oh yeah, this is even better. Um, Everybody on my YouTube, you may want to go to. If I can't get this down, let me see if I can get this down. If I can get it, because I don't think it'll let me. I don't think I can do this. I'm getting another. I'm getting another. Um, another. That's too low, so I need to bring it up some. Oh, how do I bring it? Hold on 1 second. No, I can't do it like that. Let's see if I can do it like this. Nope, I can't get you in here. I don't know. I can't bring this in. So y'all can only hear this. I'm sorry, y'all won't be able to do that. We're working on this. Pretty soon I'm gonna be able to stream on a bunch of platforms. But I want to play this video. I'm gonna turn the lights out. And I want, because I'm gonna give you a quick story. What's happened to the black community is that black men, part of this whole thing is that black men have had the shit beaten out of them by white men and everybody else the last 400 years. And when you beat the shit out of a people and you conquer them and the men lose their status, it puts the women out of order. And so, yes, all of you black women, for the most part, are out of order, whether you like it or not. If you're one of those nice sisters that's loyal, God bless you. You're in the minority. It's most sisters are out of control. They're crazy. And somebody needs to tell their ass. And most black men are either too busy being simps, begging. They can't really tell the truth, right? Because they're afraid. And so the situation that we got, this thing just turned off. In the case of the proud people of France, when the Germans beat their asses, and like in 3 weeks, in 3 weeks, the Germans kicked the French people's asses and they took their asses down. The Frenchmen completely got played out. They became nobodies, and the French women decided to do what a lot of black American women are doing now. Since the men are down and they're not shit, not that they lost and they fought, we're going to turn our backs and get what we can get off of this new group of men that are running stuff. This is what the French women did. We're gonna run with the Germans. In fact, the Germans were blonde. A lot of French ain't blonde. We're gonna run with these Aryan men, and we're gonna get all the nice food and stuff. And under the German control, the French went under mass incarceration. That's right. They start putting all the Frenchmen in jail to produce war material for the Germans. And the French women said, "Shit, we're gonna get these German dudes. We're gonna have a good, we're gonna have a good life. I don't care what happened to the French men. Y'all lost. Y'all didn't win. So I'm gonna get mine. Y'all ain't running nothing. I'm gonna do what I want. I'm right." The French women did, they did their version. Okay. Parce que la chute de l'Empire français, parce que tu ne peux pas repousser les Allemands. En result, je choisis pour les Allemands. I mean, I'm going for Germany. Regular French women sold out, was screwing the German soldiers. Yes, they did. They were swirling. Just like what we do right now. And as a result, when the French men came back at World War II, They kicked the asses of the women that were swirling and selling out. The Stacey Abrams, the hard-headed, backstabbing, Candace Owen type broads got punished. See for yourself. It's coming, judgment.
There is an old saying. It says that each of us have two countries to ourselves. One where we are born, and the other one will eventually find us. We just need to keep our eyes open, and I kept mine, and the country found me. That was France. Every time I traveled to France, my head and heart probably both wondered if I was ever French in one of my past lives. I have this strange, though so beautiful, a connection with everything that's French. Being a traveler, history fascinates me the most. History lives forever, but what keeps changing is how we perceive history through our own sentiments. This is when I was looking into the chapters of the French Liberation in 1944. If we look back to the history of women's fate, it had mostly been the darkest. A price that women had to always pay for being a race so beautiful, for being a race so tolerant, and for being a race so judged no matter what. No, I'm not a feminist, but an equalist, and yes, like most women, I often wonder what God must have had in his mind when he was creating us. There was something beyond their facets of victory that caught my attention: the fate of women accused of sleeping with the enemy, collaboration horizontal. My research on France during the World War II of the Nazi occupation in Europe brought me a lot of pain. This was a period of mass kidnapping conducted in French and Polish cities with the aim of capturing young women for sexual slavery. Women were kidnapped by German soldiers for prostitution. The German command turned the hotels into brothels for their officers, where hundreds of women were dragged mercilessly down by the streets by their arms and hair. Brothels soon became home for these French women, and accepting this life was their only choice. Most of the times, it was a compromise that these women made to survive. Their compromise not only fed them food, but also luxury at the time when the whole of their country was tearing apart by fear, hunger, and death. These girls were adjusting to a life that the world outside the brothels only detested through hatred and anger. It was a difficult time for judgment. Either part of the world were right on their part of rage. The ones who were hungry and dying, and the ones who chose to eat and survive. At the same time, in between all the compromises and rage, some of the German soldiers were also falling in love with these French women. And these love stories were beyond the war. But history always had its own mission. After 5 years of war, the World War II came to an end in the year 1944. Soon, the liberated French were rounding up the women collaborators for public humiliation. Men who volunteered to work in German factories were also captivated, but women almost always were the first targets. Altogether, 20,000 women were known to have marched down to this further act of cruelty as a punishment by the French. But the true number may be well higher than 80,000 women. During the same time, there were these resistance leaders in Paris who tried to make severe effort to stop the public acts of humiliation. But then there were also these leaders who had more strength to encourage the anger in the youth to continue the torture on these women. Their heads were shaved off, and these women were often paraded through the streets on the back of the lorries. These women were beaten inhumanly and were forced to run naked, daubed with tar. They were often marked with swastikas and paints. Some of them were even shot to death. This misogynistic reaction was actually the revenge on women almost worse than rape. Isn't it an irony that even history reassures women had mostly been condemned as the ugly part of negotiations made by the world of men?
At a critical turning point in the Second World War, 80,000 Marines prepare for a daring assault on a strategic Japanese island.
Okay. What you heard was the sanitized version. She says she's not a feminist. It's a damn lie. She's a feminist. And you have a nation that's at war. Unless someone forces you to screw somebody, you owe it to your nation to not do it. That woman just made a half-assed defense of the disloyalty of French women to France. Now, she's talking about these women being grabbed by their hair, but these men were being put in camps, men killed, men shot down. Relatively speaking, I'm not trying to say you don't want women protected and you don't want women on the battlefield and you don't want women abused, but with all due respect, my friends, with all due respect, when there's a war, you don't sleep with the enemy. There's a war being waged on us, and we think sleep with the enemy is cool. Black trifling simp swirlers and so forth, they abound. But we're not under the same kind of warfare as the French. And I see greater collaboration in our people than what this lady tried to dismiss. I want to say to you that the French women had German boyfriends, and they weren't all in brothels. These folks wanted the nice stuff, and they didn't care who brought it to them. The Frenchmen were down and the German men were up. Well, hell, I'll get me a German. Sure, it was like that. And there's a reason. And what she didn't mention is that a lot of these women that had German boyfriends ended up not just sleeping with them, but giving information that led to the men who were French standing up being killed and murdered by the very guys they're sleeping with. Those French women got punished for disloyalty. Loyalty matters. Loyalty is important. I don't give a damn what the white lesbian feminists who are loyal to white men tell stupid ass black women. The disloyalty of black American women is well known. We have a problem of disloyalty, black women. You have a disloyalty problem. You're not loyal. You're seen as being on somebody else's team or that you're mercenary. We do have sellout coon black men, and we talk about them. But when a black woman's a sellout, you don't hear it. It's not mentioned. It's time for everybody to be held accountable. And I'm just saying to you, uh uh-uh, uh, we got black women judges throwing the books, going along with the mass incarceration laws. Oh, we have so many black women prosecutors. And all those black women prosecutors didn't make a record off of putting black men in jail. The treason behavior of pork chop feminism is unforgivable, ladies. Judgment's coming. There's an awakening of misandrony. And I am saying my generation, I'll talk to you, try to reason with you, debate this thing, this millennial thing, and the thing behind it. It's it's like, wow, wow, wow. The treason must stop. I've got a book and I've got to find it. And it talks about the woman's arts movement and how the CIA and all these other people got all the black lesbians to work against. And I'm going to talk about that in this Daughters of Belitis book. Sure, the little black lesbian trader. There's another one that I had shown the other day. We're talking about the one that had one of her breasts cut off. It'll come to me. She's Caribbean too. It's time for the treason to stop. It's time for the betrayals to stop. And it's time for people to be accountable. And you always think of French men as weak and faggoty and passive. Oh, to hell, they were not. They were hot and they came after those women that ran after German guys. And this little broad who comes back later and tries to just say, well, they were all forced. No, all black women are not forced to kiss up and run after men in other groups. I've been in so many situations. I think I'm going to have a show. I'm going to just talk about some situations where you're in a professional or learning and you had a black woman just knifing you and you're like, and most black men just take it and keep going. Don't say anything. It's over. I'm speaking from a position of being a person that can see what's coming. I'm just saying to you, Oprah Winfrey and other folks, they're going to get hit. If they've been involved in human trafficking, they will drag some of the biggest black women that they've built up as successful black women, unlike black men. The shit they say on television, they built you up. The fall's coming. There's a picture with Schumer kissing on a little black girl. I should send that and show you. There's a picture of Hunter Biden naked with a little girl. And who's supporting overwhelmingly? Biden? Y'all are gonna, if Trump survives another term, there's gonna be a lot of hostility towards the people that tried to steal the election. I've been saying this since October. I don't care if you don't hear me. You'll feel the results of this emotional pork chop feminist bullshit crusade y'all been on. It's coming. And by the way, it's the judgments deserved. There's going to be a reset in Black America. And there's going to be a reset on simps. Because the sister's going to want to know, can you protect me? Not just beg me, can you protect this coochie? Now, oh my God, that video was so refreshing. I mean, got my energy back. I'm still going to take a break and come back. And thank you all. I hope that Vichy thing, there's more. Y'all want me to get another Vichy video? Because she's not. Jack, those up. They came for them. They came for the women that sold out. I'm serious. I should show y'all some more. One. This is annoying. Wait a minute. 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 I'll show y'all some more. This is not judgments coming, and I don't care if you're not scared. Y'all gonna experience. This gonna be some punishment. Hold on, that video won't give it to me. Hold on, let me get this. I'm gonna get this one. Yep, when you mess with the Nazis.
It's 1942, and the Germans occupy and dominate the vast majority of Europe. They were there, on the scene, and the local men either were not dead, in prison camps, in hiding, or were greatly diminished in status. Like soldiers of every army of every period of history, as soon as the Germans got comfortable, they started scouting around for women. And, as always in times of military occupation, there were willing women to be found. And, sure enough, the German soldiers found them. It's not quite clear what the big deal was about exchanging clothes with your French girlfriend, but it's shown on many pictures here. That seemed to be the thing to do. And it seemed quite common, as if this was the proof of, well, you know. Everyone in the Wehrmacht knew that Paris was the place to be. The official German propaganda outlets even advertised its allures. Essentially, and this is no exaggeration, Paris became almost synonymous with giant cat house in the Wehrmacht. To some extent, that reputation remains to this day in certain quarters.
A cat house.
Some of the women simply fell in love and married their German beau. Who could foresee that the world would change so drastically so quickly? Once in that situation, staying home became untenable. Time to follow husband wherever he is headed, even if it is prison camp. And sometimes you need to put aside your cynicism. Love is love, for better.
These people, basically went tricking. They 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 slept with these guys. I'm just saying. And people still talk about that. And this is absolutely the reality that these women went along with. And a lot of these, I don't know why this doesn't show the video. I can tell you where to look for it. I can tell you how to find it, but it doesn't show the video. I guess when I try to use it on my pad, it doesn't do it. All you need to do, I challenge anybody, you will find that the women in all the countries that went along and slept with the Germans, after the men in their group had been punished and knocked down and crushed, they were hated deeply. The disloyalty that we have towards one another as black people, and there's also black men that are disloyal. They trash black. But I'll tell you, it's just not on the same display. O.J. Simpson is a disloyal black man who does not deserve our support. He's completely disloyal to black people and to black women, to his own mother. And people know that about OJ. This disloyalty must stop. Um, we do need one. Lawrence Jones, that's a great thing. We need we need a black family, black men's defense group, and it shoot. I mean, just need to do it. And it doesn't take that many people. But yes, sisters, this Stacey Abrams and the stuff that's done. Look, I don't mind a black person being senator. I don't mind a black person winning. In fact, I'd be quite happy if black folks got stuff. I'm not anti black people, but it shouldn't be someone like War Nuts who doesn't give a damn. And Stacey Abrams, for all the stuff you're hearing about Stacey Abrams, you can't hear or point to any major accomplishments that she's done for black people. She's basically been an operative of the Democratic Party. I'm gonna stop here. It's 2:31, 2 hours and 31 minutes. We'll get back with this. I still got books. I got stuff. So we still got Dr. King and Bob Lewis and Baker, and I'm gonna go through a couple more of these. The reading's gonna be good. Um, I'm gonna deal with the most boring things first and try to get rid of them. So I'm gonna look at the psychological warfare. Yes, I am. And then we're going to get back into race and sex. I just think it's important. So, for all of you, with 100 and so odd people looking, I'll be back at 7. I'm thinking between 3:30, 4 o'clock. We'll do another huge session. Let's see if we can run it from it. And I'm thinking, I actually think there's going to be. Hmm, I'm thinking, my friends, that I might even be able to be on Facebook in a couple of hours. I'll be on Facebook. Let me see. We'll see. That's fun. I don't know how long that's going to last. I'm kind of tired of Facebook. Let me see. How many hours? Hold on. Let me go back. Oh, my. Okay. I'm back on Facebook. I don't know how long that's going to last. So when I come back, we're going to have a hell of a lot larger audience. We're going to have an audience of what? Maybe we're going to eventually, these audiences are going to get up to about 400 people, 500 people. And I look forward to that. Um, I've got to work on my restream and this other stream here. And then you're going to start to see this take off. So, Coonbusters, we're going to push really hard to learn something. So, let me see, it's 2:09. I'm thinking between 3:30 and 4 o'clock, I'll be back with you and we'll be doing again. I've got books from all over, and I hope this stuff means something. I might even start off with some trash, although I got like a whole bunch of y'all. How many of y'all? I should read some trash before I go. There's still some people listening. Hold on 1 second. Um, there are 34 people, so there are 100 people. Should I do it? Yeah, I'm gonna add some more trash. I'll take a few minutes. I'm gonna read something from this book I love so much. God, I love this book. This white woman. There's so much trash in this book. I should. If I do it now, I don't have to do it later. You know what? Mm, 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 mm. Oh, this thing is so stupid. This is an acknowledgments. I don't want that. I want to see something. Oh my. Who should I do? Mm, mm, mm. I want to see what she says about patriarchy. Oh God, I can't stand this lady. Patriarchy. Oh, 64.75. Mhm. Just wondering, this lady is such a crazy ass broad. Mm. I want to look up something. I want to look up a better word. See what she says about that. Nah. Okay. Now it's 34 and 69. Now, all of y'all, maybe I should look at someone else. Let me go to one of my favorite books here. I may as well give y'all from this phenomenal book here, full of dirt and sludge. I should mention someone who's no damn good. Um, I love looking at these really idiotic people. Yeah. Okay. No. Let me stop. There are 100 of you guys. I'll be right back. I'm gonna stop for a second and here full of dirt and sludge. I should mention someone who's no damn. I I need to take it. I better. I've had too much fun telling the truth. Let me stop. It's 2:15. I'll join you. 3:30, 4 o'clock. Who you gonna call? Coonbusters. It's time to just get up, break up out of here. I'll see you in a little bit. Bye. Mhm. Mhm. Damn.